Good evening and welcome to the podcast. I'm Zach Newman. I'm here with my friends Tanner Seacrest.
Oh, hey there, bud.
Daniel Queering.
Oh, hello there, Heidi ho there, neighbor guy.
Oh, it's the podcast in the woods there.
Oh, yeah, bud. Let's just go out for a rip and...
This is not an episode about Fargo.
Shoot some clappers.
You might think by the way we're talking.
We didn't all convert to Vikings fans. Or something
I
like
have.
that. Oh.
I mean, if you haven't at least considered
After that
it...
Diggs play.
Yeah.
Might as well.
The Minneapolis Miracle.
Yeah. This is going to air after the Super Bowl, but I just want to say, I hope they won.
Yeah, me too.
I hope they made it to the Super Bowl.
If it's the Vikings and the Jags in the Super Bowl, I literally couldn't care who won. Because I like both teams enough to... well, basically, if the Patriots don't win, I'm fine.
I think this is a good playoff year just because a majority of the teams weren't in the playoffs last year. So it's cool to see, I don't know, some up-and-comers in the league.
Other than the Titans.
Other than the Titans.
Everyone else, but just not the Titans.
Yeah, the Titans.
That's not nice to see.
The Titans and the Steelers can just go.
I agree. I will say that my secondary, just because I know so many Chiefs fans, I'll say my secondary identification is as a Chiefs fan. So.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Mariota. Boo, Mariota. How dare you throw a touchdown pass to yourself?
Thank you for that solidarity. We really appreciate it. I mean, it doesn't help. The game's already over, but...
Yeah. But it's the thought that counts, much like Christmas presents.
And I think it was because Tennessee won their last game of the year that the Chargers weren't able to make it to the playoffs. Because I think both Buffalo and Tennessee had to lose in order for the Chargers to make it.
Yeah. And
I think they both won.
They did.
So.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate.
It was. But I mean, 9-7 season, Chargers turned it around from last year and the year before that. So I think it's on the up.
On the up, hope for the future.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Chargers were pretty good before the last few years. They're just kind of in a lull.
They were pretty good until they were terrible.
That hurt, man.
That's basically what you said.
Yeah. I think that 4-12 season was pretty painful to watch.
Not
for us. Even for a casual fan like me. Well, it was especially painful because, it was last year. And it was last year when pretty much everyone in the AFC West was really good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
From the Broncos to the Raiders to the Chiefs, and then you had.
And now they're all terrible.
Except for the Chargers, 9-7, not too bad.
9-7.
It's not too bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
I mean, I was gonna give it a grade, but
that's what the record's for.
Not really a good.
Not a good comparison.
Not a good comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you go 8-8, that's 50%, but you didn't fail the season.
Yeah. That's why I didn't give it a grade.
I stand behind that decision.
But also C-. All right, what have you guys been up to? Anything?
I've been up to something.
What you been up to?
So, part of the reason I started the podcast off with a little Canadian accent is because the guys in my house and I drove down to Dallas to watch a Dallas Stars versus the Edmonton Oilers game.
I'm going to be completely honest, I didn't know the Dallas Stars were a team that existed.
Yeah, they're a hockey team. And if you're kind of on the fence with concussions and everything else about the NFL, just know that the NHL is pretty fun to watch and the games are pretty great. So if you need a fallback sport, you should choose the NHL.
Good to know.
So,
see, I think a couple of years ago when the Olympics were on, I think it was when... Oh, no, it would have been... I remember because it was in the Man House. So it was my senior year. We were watching handball. I think that would be my fallback sport.
That's a crazy sport.
I liked watching handball. That was fun.
That's an insane sport.
It's kind of like a combination between soccer and basketball and football.
And ultimate frisbee.
Yeah.
That's a lot of sports.
Yeah.
Rolled into one.
It takes all the good parts out of all of those sports and puts them together.
Yeah. So, I think that would be my fallback sport.
Yeah.
Is there anything about this hockey game, or do you just want to say that you went there?
Well, there was a funny story that we did, but we might get in trouble. It's fine. So, we get there, and we had to buy our seats separately, and so one of the guys in our house, he sat down on his seat, and his seat was, he was sitting on something, and he was like, what the heck? So he went to put his arm down, like on the armrest, to like lift up so he could see what he was sitting on, and his arm just went straight through. And he was like, what the heck? So he stands up, and the armrest had been broken off and was just sitting in his seat. And so he wrapped it up in his sweatshirt, and when we left, he just carried it out, and we brought it back with us, so it's sitting on our mantle right now. So,
what a prize.
Yeah. American Airlines Center in Dallas, Texas.
They can suck it?
I guess.
Yeah. They're not going to get that arm back.
I mean, I don't have anything against
Maybe now.
I don't have anything against the Stars, so
I think they're probably okay, like financially, to replace that.
Yeah, and
I think,
they'll probably make the playoffs.
If you're gonna kind of put it to the man, I mean, I think an airline is a good way to, is a good place to start.
Charge me $150 for baggage, why don't you? I'll steal an arm
off of your chair.
Not from the airline itself, just a stadium that you happen to sponsor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Nice.
Yeah.
The three of us all made a short film today.
We did.
Yeah.
2 hours total.
Yeah, it was the quickest project ever.
Yeah.
Well, that we've ever done. Maybe not like ever.
Yeah, probably not.
In the history of projects.
Yeah.
Might have won that race. Probably not.
So what we did was, one of my goals for this year is to make a short film every month. Who's to say if I've, met that goal by the time this comes out?
Yeah.
But for January, I have. And so we were all going to be here for a recording session. I was like, hey guys, I brought the camera, but I have no ideas.
Let's do something.
Yeah, so we went like at midnight and started walking around Tabor and the new Center for the Arts, and we got several ideas.
Yeah,
just walking
and
around.
then today we went around and shot it in 2 hours.
And that was one of the things I was telling these guys before we were trying to think up what to do. It was like, if you're sitting down thinking of like a skit, at least for me, that's almost impossible. But if you like give me a context, so like when we went and walked around, like it's easier.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't want to speak for you guys, but
well, yeah, like I don't come up with that many ideas just like out of the blue. Like the one that we're gonna try and do next month, it was like, I can't think of anything. Let's just choose who's gonna be in it. And I was like, Austin, pick a genre, and he was like, drama. And I said, okay. Like that was literally it. And then you have a framework to work from.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just walked around the building, and we were like, this would be funny.
Yeah.
And then we shot it. Hopefully it is funny. It's probably up by this time. Who knows if I've edited it.
The actresses the actress that we had laughed at most of the stuff.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
That was a good sign.
But also, there are some things that we definitely think are really funny at the time.
Yeah.
We'll just see. We'll see if it pans out.
Yeah.
I like how we're like, we did this thing. It might be funny. If it's not, don't blame us. Like we're just immediately
hedging already. My first time using the camera, and it'll also be it'll be my first time editing not on Windows Movie Maker, because I edited The Dog in the Woods.
Mm-hmm.
But, Dog in the Woods was a high quality production.
It was.
We spared no expense so long as that expense was free.
That's true.
Well, hey, what we did today was literally free.
It was.
We've never done a free thing before.
Wow.
Besides the Dog in the Woods.
No, because we had to buy stuff for the fake blood.
We had to travel.
And we had to buy the bananas.
Oh, yeah. And then the music. No.
I did have to buy an album, yeah.
You did buy an album, yeah. I remember correctly. And we bought Frosties for all the female actors that we
had. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, we might have to do an episode on the Dog in the Woods.
Oh, we definitely should.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, future project.
I mean, like I said,
promises.
I still giggle whenever I watch that movie.
Maybe for like our episode 50 or something.
Yeah.
There
or
you go.
a number,
Yeah.
50th episode.
50 or like 1,000 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Or we could do like a. Well, let's see. This spring is going to be what, like the 2 or 3 year anniversary.
2 year, yeah.
Do the 2 year.
Wow, guys, we've been a company for so long.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. Are we really a company?
I mean,
we don't really sell anything.
It's true.
I would say
what would you
we're,
call us? A group?
I would say a production team.
Okay, a team.
The team.
Yeah.
Go team.
But I think like if we have enough of a fan base someday that we like can sell stuff. Then
Once we're like incorporated,
yeah,
then we'll be a company.
once we have a bank account that is exclusively for the Dog in the Woods.
Yeah. For the meantime, we can call ourselves like a troupe, maybe.
Yeah.
There you go.
Modern day vaudeville troupe.
Yeah. And except we come to all of your living rooms through the magic that is the internet superhighway.
Oh, speaking of the internet superhighway, this segue doesn't make any sense. Today, we're talking about 2 movies. We're talking about the movie 1984, which the adaptation from the year 1984, because there's multiple adaptations, directed by Michael Radford, and Eagle Eye from 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2008, directed by DJ Caruso. We're doing a compare and contrast episode. This was your thought, Dan.
Yeah, so 1984 was a book I read in high school. Really a classic book as far as literature goes in the field of politics or also dystopian fantasies. Eagle Eye is kind of a thriller. I think it's technically a techno-thriller. But
Which
I remember
means there's technology, not techno music.
Yeah. But I remember like watching it as a kid and really liking it. And I was like, well, I think these two have at least similar themes, right? So we could compare it. But, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But as I watched Eagle Eye in 1984, and now that I'm an adult, and of course adults think about things a little bit more. I was like,
usually,
I was like, these films are actually, I'd say, more different than alike, but I think it's still, there's some cool things to talk about. So.
We'll see what kind of similarities we can find. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each movie on its own, and then we're going to do our comparison. So we're not going to go as in depth with the research as we usually do, since we're talking about 2 movies. So let's just start with 1984. I'll give a summary.
Sure.
Since I never give summaries.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so 1984 is about this guy, Winston Smith, who lives in the dystopian world of the year 1984. The government and Big Brother is literally everywhere, watching all the time. And he meets this girl, Julia, and they figure out that they're both sort of rebelling against the man, in a way. And they're like, well, let's have an affair. Which is illegal?
Yeah, I think sex is illegal. In that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's in 1984's world, there's kind of like, there's the inner party, there's the outer party, and then there's the proles, which is short for the proletariats. And so the government, like the proletariats are all like the poor, dumb people, essentially. And the government doesn't really care what they do. But like the outer party and the inner party, which is what Winston and Julia are part of, those people are pretty highly regulated in their lives.
Yeah, so they do that. They get caught. Winston gets tortured.
Mm-hmm.
And then the surprise ending. He loves Big Brother.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's my summary.
They clean his mind.
They do.
They brainwash him.
So, thoughts, general discussion thoughts on 1984.
It's kind of a downer.
Oh, I'd say so.
Yeah, like the definition of if you're feeling great about yourself but you don't want to, watch 1984. It'll even you out real quick.
Yeah, and the at least the book, because I read the book. Like I said, I read the book in high school, and it's a very political book. It's definitely it's more of a long. So it's a fiction book, right? But it's definitely, you can tell, like, this was a political philosopher who decided to pretty much talk about his philosophy in terms of a fiction book. So it doesn't read like a novel, right?
Yeah.
It's very, it's got some academic depth to it. So I don't know, I feel like the movie reflected that a bit. It didn't, I don't know, it was pretty gritty.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of romanticism or anything in that. It's everything is pretty bleak. So I don't think it's, and I don't think it even attempted to have you at the edge of your seat or anything like that. I think you kind of, you're just kind of this passive observer.
Yeah. I'm going to be totally honest. I was not a huge fan of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that 1984 might be almost unfilmable.
Yeah.
Like, or at least, because this movie's less than 2 hours long. I think to really properly do 1984, it might have to be more like 3 hours long, because
they could do like a mini-series.
A mini-series, yeah.
Like
HBO, if you're listening.
After you finish,
hit not a sponsor.
Hit us up.
Yeah.
But like, the whole idea of it is that Big Brother's everywhere, and the world is just so immersive, and I just didn't feel that. It was just like, oh, people are watching you, but then mostly it's like these people having an affair, and then they get caught. Like,
Well,
it felt like it was about that affair,
mm-hmm.
and then it was about him being tortured, but it didn't feel like it was about government surveillance.
Yeah.
More like it was a movie with government surveillance in it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'd say the best part of the movie and the best part of the book is whenever, and also the longest part of the book, or at least, there's times in the book where, time passes quickly, like in a matter of a few chapters, a few weeks have passed. But then in the book, the last part of the book, whenever Winston is being tortured in the Ministry of Love, which, ironically, the Ministry of Love is where people get tortured, essentially, and brainwashed. So that's in the book, that's when time kind of slows down, right? The last third of the book is all that time. And so it's very methodical. You have these long, drawn-out conversations between Winston Smith and O'Brien, who's the guy torturing him. And you just kind of get this exposition of what is this rationale behind Big Brother, how they control people, what their aim is, what sort of powers that you inflict on their people. And so that's where kind of, at least in the book, that's where kind of the terror comes from, which is diving deep into the psyche of this totalitarian government. But you kind of miss that with the movie. So you kind of take away, I think, a strong element of at least the message of the book or the theme of the book by kind of minimizing those sort of methodical areas.
One thing, because you kind of said that you felt like it wasn't immersive, but when I was watching it, it was like, there's people talking in the cafeteria, and there's something happening on the television screen, or what do they call it? They called it something vision screen.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's basically a TV, but it's like a two-way TV, so people can see out of it also. But anyways, there's something happening and talking about the war against East Eurasia, and then they're walking. What?
You combined all the powers into one.
Well, isn't that how they're fighting?
It's East Asia and Eurasia.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anyways, and so then there's a shot of him walking in the hallways or walking outside, and there's just announcements happening outside, or in the pub, there's people confessing and apologizing for their crimes against Airstrip 1 and everything. And so it's like, no matter what's happening, the whole point, or the government is basically just continually just blasting this propaganda at their citizens. So in that sense, to me at least, it felt pretty immersive. And then it was like, you never know if there's someone behind the screen watching you or not. So you're always on your best behavior.
I don't know. Maybe it just felt like that aspect of it never came to the foreground.
Yeah.
for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because you're talking about the point whenever they're pretty much about to execute these traitors in the street. But towards the end of the film, or towards the end of the story, you come to realize that Winston himself, after being tortured, is forced to confess to all these things he did not do. So, it calls into question, well, this rebellion, this leader of this rebellion against Big Brother, is it even real? Or is Big Brother just making up its own internal enemy, its own rebellion, in order to have an excuse to make an example out of certain of its citizens? I don't know. From what I remember from reading the book, it seemed like, at least to me, that whole resistance was an actual thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from the movie's perspective, it seemed like there wasn't really any evidence to it. It was just kind of a fabrication by Big Brother.
Just like a trap.
Yeah, that's what exactly it is for Winston, right? O'Brien kind of pretends to be someone an inner party member who is a part of this resistance with, I think is it Goldman? Or something
Goldstein.
Emmanuel Goldstein. But in the book, there's actually meetings that Winston goes to with O'Brien and other people that are supposedly a part of the resistance with Emmanuel Goldstein. So that was something that also was out of the movie as well. That was cut out of the movie.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe that's why it just would need to be longer, because really it just felt like guy has an affair, guy gets tortured. Honestly.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a commentary on the time it was written in the 80s. I don't know, because in the 80s you're kind of at the end of the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
Which is you had the hippies. They're they didn't like the government. They lived in communes. They wanted to sleep with whoever they wanted. Kind of generally. So I don't know. Maybe that's why this movie took a little bit more of a focus on. It just looks like these guys are getting tortured for wanting to sleep with each other. So maybe that it was a product of the times.
Yeah. I don't know enough to know how people felt about government in the 80s as opposed to the 40s. Because, totalitarianism was a huge thing in the 40s and 50s. And
that's one of the things I had written down here is that, when the book was written, which was in the 40s or so, this totalitarian thing was, a real thing. So these weren't things, a lot of the things that happen in the book aren't things that, George Orwell just thought of. These are things that, the Nazis actually did, and he got the ideas from them. Things like Newspeak, how the government in the movie is changing the way everyone talks, and the reason why they want to change the way everyone talks and make new vocabulary words and stuff like that is to make it so that it's impossible to formulate negative thoughts towards Big Brother.
They're constantly, each new dictionary, they're just eliminating words out of the language that you're no longer allowed to use.
So they want people to communicate with as few vocabulary words as possible in order to pretty much eliminate any sort of thought against Big Brother. It's essentially massive brainwashing on just a whole cultural scale.
Yeah, it's a deeper level than just surveillance.
Yes.
It's about allegiance, not just in word, but even in thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think there's a little bit about this on there, but this whole idea of whittling down the language to as few words as possible or changing the meanings of common words was, I think, something that was studied during the Nazi regime. So I looked up something. It was about this guy named Victor Klemperer, and he was a linguist in Nazi Germany, but he was Jewish. So he was stripped of all of his scholarship, and he was forced to work in a factory. But he, while he was there, he kind of examined how the German language and how everyday speech was kind of changed during the Nazi era. And so the Nazis started using a lot of innocent words to mean bad things. Right, so they, instead of saying arrest, they'd say pick up, or instead of defeat, they'd use the word crisis. Special treatment meant murder. If they use the word fanatical, they used the word fanatical in a positive sense whenever it meant loyalty towards the Nazis, but it was a negative connotation when they were discussing like how supposedly Jewish people hated the Nazi Party and things like that. So I don't know. That's Victor Klemperer. So maybe that was one of the areas that Orwell got his ideas too.
Yeah, because like you think about our ideas of government control today, and that's more like political things, like, you know, conservative or liberal, whereas Nazism was an ideology more than just a party, political party. Also, not the other kind of party. But yeah, just like almost, they almost had that kind of religious devotion to those ideas, which is like, it's another level.
Yeah.
Which I think is more what 1984 is getting at than maybe some of the ideas we have about government totalitarianism today. I didn't say that word very well, but you know what I meant.
It's okay. But yeah, so I think 1984 definitely takes a focus on, it's definitely more ideological than if you compare it to Eagle Eye, which we'll talk about Eagle Eye here, in a second. But one observation I made earlier is that both 1984 and Eagle Eye, of course, yes, they involve like government overreach, right? But they're all very contextualized within the time that they were written.
Yeah. So
1984 is really speaking about realities that were prevalent then, like the Soviets, the Nazis, and then Eagle Eye is more about like fears of things like government surveillance against terrorism, the Patriot Act, things like that, wiretapping of just normal citizens, again, without a warrant or anything like that.
Yeah, so let's get into Eagle Eye. Who wants to summarize that movie?
I can do it.
Do it. Go for it.
So Eagle Eye starts out with two main characters. One named Jerry Shaw, who is played by Shia LaBeouf, actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf, and
quiet.
And there's also a single mother named Rachel Holloman, and these two have totally separate lives. But one day, what happens is Jerry Shaw comes back from work, and he finds out that his twin brother Ethan Shaw has died. And so the difference between Jerry and Ethan is a big deal in this movie. Jerry Shaw is an identical twin of his brother, but he's always been underachieving, kind of rebellious, really smart guy. I think he went to Stanford for a little while, but he's just an underperformer. Ethan Shaw was the opposite. He was a perfectionist, overperformer. He was like a top guy in the Air Force or something like that. He ends up being in like special forces or like Secret Service, pretty much, for the Air Force. And then, so Jerry Shaw comes back after the death of his brother, Ethan. He comes back to his apartment, and he finds that his apartment is full of things to destroy the government. So, like assault rifles, pistols, fertilizer, grenades, like all these super illegal things. And then all of a sudden he gets a call on his phone, and it's this woman on the other side. And she says, Jerry Shaw, you've been activated. You have 1 minute to escape your apartment before FBI agents come and break down your door. And so, of course, he's very confused. He's like, how did you get this here? What is happening to me? And while he's asking all these questions, of course, the FBI comes and get him. And so there's a series of events that take place after that. Now, Rachel Holloman is, like I said, is a single mother. Her son is a part of a band who is a band for youths. So they're about to play the national anthem for the State of the Union address. And so he gets on a train and goes on a trip to Washington, D.C. with his band. And meanwhile, Rachel gets a call back home saying, it's the same woman again. And she says, Rachel Holloman, if you want to see your son again, you will do this and this and this. So eventually, these Rachel and Jerry come together and they both figure out that they're being manipulated by this same person. And so it's kind of I don't know, it's a thriller definitely, but it's a movie. Kind of has like a mystery aspect to it because you don't know what's going on or what this purposes are or what this woman is, and it all kind of just comes together and is kind of this realization at the end of the movie. It turns out that the woman on the other end of the line is this supercomputer in the basement of the Pentagon that essentially is able to monitor and listen to cameras, phone calls, computers, anything across the nation simultaneously. I mean, this is such a huge computer. It has to be cooled by liquid nitrogen. That's like, it's like a swimming pool full of liquid nitrogen.
Is that what that was for?
I think.
Because I was really confused about that.
It's either water or it's with liquid nitrogen. And so what's happening here is that Eagle Eye, which is the name of this computer, the program is called Eagle Eye. The computer is called like Aria or something. Yeah. So it turns out Aria was essentially advising these military generals on whether to do a military strike, a missile strike to take out a certain terrorist. And Aria was saying, no, the facial recognition is off. There's not a high probability here. You'd be destroying the entire village of innocent people and this terrorist, even if you did it. So, the risk is too high. But the generals decided to go ahead and do it anyways. So there's this programming in Aria where she essentially has judged that the people in charge have abandoned the Constitution and have pretty much overstepped their bounds. So it's the computer itself that orchestrates a plot to blow up the entire State of the Union address, killing the president, vice president, and all these senators, and so establishing a new reign for the federal government. And so once Jerry Shaw and Rachel Holloman figure this out, they try to stop it, to save people's lives.
All right, thoughts on the movie?
It was okay.
Yeah. Whenever I watched again, I mean, I really liked it when I was like 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
But then I hadn't watched it since then. And so then I watched it again and I was like, oh yeah, this is a solid okay.
Yeah. Before I watched it, I was like looking it up and I was like, oh, it got pretty bad reviews.
Yeah.
And I understand why, but it was not like unwatchable or like boring or unenjoyable.
No. I think it's it's like an action movie kind of in the style of like who's the Transformer guy? Michael Bay.
Yeah.
Right? Because these ridiculous stuff happen. And so that in itself is kind of entertaining. So for instance, when Jerry Shaw gets picked up by the FBI, he's being interrogated and the computer, Aria, sends a fax to the FBI that says allow Jerry Shaw to have one phone call. And so they're like, okay, so they put him in this corner office in this skyscraper to get the phone call, and then the phone call comes to the office. He picks it up, and it's Aria, and she says, like, lay flat on the ground. And he's like, what? And she says, lay flat on the ground. And so then, all of a sudden, Aria has taken control of this construction crane, swung it around, smashed it into the face of the building, and then left it a gaping hole in it so that Jerry Shaw can just jump out of the building and escape.
Yeah.
So it's like stuff like that that's like, I never saw that coming, you know.
And I'd forgotten about that bit when I was watching it, and I was like, oh yeah, she can control anything.
Yeah.
I don't know, like what phase of like programming this computer was at, like how developed it was, but they evidently did not program subtlety into its system. It's like,
yeah.
oh, how do I get this guy? I'm going to smash this part of a building with a crane. It's like, oh, everybody knows what's going on now. And like one of the things I read was because the stuff in his apartment was supposed to be incriminating, and it was like 2 of those things would have been fine. But his apartment is so full of stuff he can like barely get in and move around inside it.
Yeah, like there's not even furniture in there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because he comes home and his landlady is like, "Oh, we were running out of places to put all the boxes." It's like, yeah, you were. And he's just like, "What boxes?" I don't know. That part just struck me as funny. It was like, really, you didn't have any questions as to why he was receiving so many boxes?
And these aren't just boxes. These are like shiny, hard-cased, like military type cases.
Yeah, like that have guns inside them.
They're not just They're not just like Amazon boxes.
It's like has like some secret government department like logo on it instead of Amazon, and it's like in a goofy font or something.
So I've been looking on the internet this entire time since we mentioned it, but it is in fact not liquid nitrogen, because if it was liquid nitrogen, there would be a fog coming off the surface because it would boil off and evaporate at room temperature. And so, since it's not contained or pressurized, the liquid's probably water. So
Does someone fall into it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I don't know if
the only
nitrogen
thing
dangerous to touch.
Probably.
Liquid nitrogen?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist.
I wouldn't want to touch it.
Me either.
I mean, like it's so. In order for nitrogen to be liquid, it has to be so cold that even like opening it up at room temperature will cause it to immediately evaporate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's why if you've ever seen someone make like liquid nitrogen ice cream, whenever they pour the liquid nitrogen into the ice cream, like almost half of like all that liquid nitrogen will evaporate before it even hits the ice cream. So yeah, I thought I saw some fogging. That's what it made me think.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was just for dramatic effect.
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, so like I said, the Eagle Eye is, highly contextual within 2008 time period, because even today, there's things about, government surveillance and stuff like that. I looked up a little bit of stuff about government surveillance and stuff like the Patriot Act. And so, I mean, you've heard of Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
Right?
Have I?
So I've always heard of Edward Snowden, but until today I didn't really know like why he was wanted. Because he was an NSA contractor for the government, and so I know that he leaked a lot of information. I just didn't know what he leaked, and so I looked up what he leaked, and it was pretty much two things: that the NSA forced Verizon to hand over all its telephone data on a daily basis. And that the NSA also tapped directly into 9 internet firms, including Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo, and was pretty much monitoring all that stuff, probably illegally.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So basically, the only internet that almost anyone uses.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read that during the filming of this movie, they had an FBI agent. It was like a consultant or something, and he told Shia LaBeouf that 1 in 5 phone calls are recorded, and he was like, "Oh, here's one that you made a couple of years ago." And he played him the recording.
I saw that that was on the trivia section, right? Of IMDb. I mean, that's that'd be pretty crazy. I don't know what I would do if I were Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. I don't know if this is really about, because it's kind of two different ideas between privacy and, because it's like, oh, I don't want the government listening in on my phone calls, versus the government having so much free reign of information that they do all this collateral damage. I feel like those are different things.
Yeah, and I think that definitely the theme of like Eagle Eye is that theme of security versus freedom, right? Because it seems like sure. you if you want more security, you got to trade some freedoms, and if you want more freedom, you got to trade security. So you know what? And I think in 1984 is that to an extent, right? All at least the totalitarian governments that arose in the 1930s and 40s had to do with people who saw these societal problems and were willing to give as much power to the government as they could in order to solve that problem, right? And so obviously they gave them too much.
Yeah.
Or they gave them a little bit and the government said a little bit more until eventually it was too late.
Yeah.
And that's like...
I mean, yeah, like Hitler was democratically elected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's huge paranoia in America.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they passed this law that takes away a little bit of our liberty. Literally Hitler.
Yeah.
Every president is literally Hitler.
Yeah, and so, which is really unfortunate because now if someone gets called Hitler, it's like, no, not a big deal.
So what?
So what?
Yeah.
Like, Mother
Lots of
Teresa was
people are
called
Hitler.
Hitler once. Like, that doesn't scare me.
You don't scare me, Hitler. So that's Eagle Eye. So let's get into our comparison contrast section. What are some similarities if we can find some? They're both about surveillance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But it is kind of different surveillance.
Yeah.
In Eagle Eye, it's surveillance that you don't know is happening. In 1984, you're always aware that you're either being watched or could be being watched. And like in Eagle Eye, it's like just everyone's living their lives, da-da-da-da-da. But in 1984, like one guy gets turned into the thought police because his kids turned him in. And it's like, you never know. Like someone could be like, oh, this thing that you did means that you had a thought against the government. And you can't say no because you're a thought criminal. And so, yeah, it's very different types of...
It's like
everything.
Surveillance as a means of coercion, like, yeah, we're watching you, versus surveillance as a means of spying. Or
surveillance doesn't mean it's preserving safety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So, like with Eagle Eye, you have a government that actually cares about people, to an extent. In 1984, you see governments that see people only as resources, really, as a way of exacerbating power. And so it's very different worlds, right? Because in 1984, you kind of get this sense that, everyone knows the extent to which they're caged up and like how much control is being seized from them. But no one dares really to work against it.
Yeah. I think we were talking about a product of its time. I think they're both obviously about government, but I think it just shows the contrast of how people think about government power and totalitarianism in two different eras. Because 1984 is about ideology and thought crime and the government invading every area of your life. And Eagle Eye, I think what Eagle Eye is getting at, which I don't think it's thematically super focused as a movie,
No.
but I think what it's getting at is with the Patriot Act and all these things that happened after 9/11. It's about like responsibility with the information you have. Like, it's not about our daily lives, it's about the morality of the government. And because when everybody panicked after 9/11, it was like, oh, we're going to pass this act that says you can do anything if it's a danger to national security. And so it's examining the balance of national security versus, liberty and privacy, and basically says, I don't know if it's just this is a movie and a work of fiction, or if it's saying, yeah, they did a bad thing. They did it wrong. They overstepped their bounds. Because in the movie, the government does. Mm-hmm. And the response is, they've set up the computer. It's like a sci-fi way of saying, these are the rules that the country runs by, the Constitution. And if we put it into this computer, into our, constitutional algorithm, we can prove scientifically you did the wrong thing.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to me why they felt the need to give Arya a program in which she's capable of overthrowing the government. Like, because I think whenever she starts something called Operation
Guillotine.
Yeah, Guillotine. Who the heck programmed that? Like, why in God's name would you do that? So, I mean, that's one aspect of it. But I think maybe Eagle Eye is also, maybe if it had like any sort of pointed theme to it, it was maybe trying to be an awakening call to everyday people, right? Because there's really a sharp contrast between Jerry and Rachel, who pretty much had their entire lives turned upside down and hijacked by this computer, and then everyone else is just
no one knows.
They don't know. And so but at the beginning of Eagle Eye, you see radio broadcasts, news broadcasts that talk about all the time about the government can now listen through your phones. The only way to avoid it is to not only turn it off, but to take the battery out. And people hear it, and it goes in one ear and out the other, and they don't really pay attention. And so even while these two people are having their entire lives just torn apart by this reality, everyone else in the movie, literally everyone else in the movie, is just completely unaware. And so, I don't know, maybe the part of the point of the movie is saying, if we knew all the things that the government has been doing or is capable of at this point right now in the United States, it would be frightening and confusing to us, just like receiving a phone call from a strange woman who's actually a supercomputer, right? I don't know. So, I mean, even out of all the political things, that you ever see, government surveillance is hardly ever talked about. It's more just whatever Donald Trump tweeted the other day.
Yeah,
about the blank hole countries or whatever.
We're in a lot has changed since 2008.
Yeah. I feel like people care way more now about like how they perceive leaders to be and like what they say rather than like what actually is done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's almost 10 years ago.
It is.
We're on our third president since then.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
2008 would have been...
Oh, that would have been
Obama's
the
first
election.
year.
Obama would have been
Yeah.
inaugurated in 2009.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
probably
yeah,
Bush was still president.
Yeah, I can definitely see this kind of movie getting made while George W. Bush was in office.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, this whole issue of government surveillance has essentially been a bipartisan thing, right? You haven't seen really either side be big mobilizing against the Patriot Act or things like that.
Yeah.
It's been something that's just kind of been accepted by both Republicans and Democrats.
Which, that's how we know something's wrong, because both sides are so diametrically opposed to each other that if they're agreeing on anything, that can't be a good sign.
We're a bunch of nihilists here. Political nihilists.
So, yeah, I feel like we mostly talked about differences.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Similarities, definitely government surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely how government can impact everyday people, right? Or how essentially the sort of control that can be had over everyday people. And so in 1984, that control is an actuality for every citizen every day. For Eagle Eye, it is something that the government flexes its muscles for two people pretty much, very specifically, but yet it's still just as powerful.
I feel like that's probably more frightening.
Mm-hmm.
That they have capabilities we don't know about, and they're controlling us in ways we don't understand, rather than being upfront about it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I tell this story sometimes about my grandpa was in the Korean War, and he blew up nuclear bombs in Nevada, in the test range there. But there during the Cold War, there was an airplane that was used for surveillance called the SR-71 Blackbird, and it would fly over radar and then photograph like Russian installations and stuff like that. And so I guess they decommissioned or they declassified this airplane that was used in the 1950s in like the 1990s. And then so in the 1990s they let all of these private sector engineers come in, aircraft engineers, and look at it. And it's like 40 years later. This thing is 40 years old, and the engineers in the private sector were like, this is years beyond anything we've even figured out. And it was already 40 years old. So you're just like, holy cow. Like, what the heck is going on? You know?
Yeah. I mean, back in the 60s, there's like broadcasts and stuff that have subliminal messaging like embedded in them. So think about how much time we spend our lives on a screen now. And think about all the stuff that they could be subliminally messaging us.
What was an example of the old subliminal messaging?
I don't remember. I'll have to do a little more in podcast research.
Oh, so 2 things. First of all, have you ever been to the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson?
Mm-hmm.
Once a long time ago.
They have a blackbird hanging in the lobby.
And they've got one at the Strategic Air Command Museum in Omaha, Nebraska, too.
Okay.
So I've seen that one.
So, shout out to the Cosmosphere, not a sponsor. But the other thing is, not subliminal messaging, but this is like unrelated. But back during the Satanic Panic, when they were worried about backmasking and like subliminal messages on records, and there was
records backwards.
Yeah, and there was some band that like got sued because someone listened to their music and then committed suicide, and his mother was like, it's because of the messages you put in your records. And they were like, if we were going to put subliminal messages in our music, it would be buy more records. I don't remember what band that was, but
it's a surprisingly quippy response to a mother whose son just committed suicide.
Like the other members of the band probably were like high-fiving him and she's like crying in the background or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Find anything?
Yeah, I mean, everything on the internet you have to take with a grain of salt because there's a lot of crazy people out there, but like one of them is a clip of a national anthem that has the words of the national anthem on it, but it also has the subliminal messaging like right behind it. So it's like, oh, say can you see, trust the government, by the dawn's early light, God is real, God is watching, what so proudly we hailed, believe in government, that sort of thing all the way through.
How are those?
Is it just like another track that's recorded?
Yeah.
Or...
No, it's like in the pixel, like on TV.
Oh, on TV.
Yeah. Like in the pixels, yeah.
Interesting that they decided to do that linkage between God and government.
Yeah.
Right? Because so if they're going to put subliminal in the 1960s, if they're going to do subliminal messaging, telling you to trust the government, God is watching you, trust the government, it's probably not because they like want everyone to believe in God.
Yeah. Right?
They want to draw some sort of corollary between the government is your God, the government will do everything for you, stuff like that.
I think it's interesting that, so like during that time, what were they fighting against? Communism, where the government runs everything. And yet, well, you need to trust our government.
To protect us from their government.
Yeah, but still, it's like, believe in your government.
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, obviously they have a different way of doing things because they're not communists, but it's still the same.
It's a very slippery
trust
slope.
us, we'll take care of you.
And, that actually points, very well to 1984. Because during 1984, you find out that there's these 3 main world powers. Eurasia, East Asia, and Oceania, which is, Oceania is where Big Brother's at. And it's pretty much said, all 3 of these nations, ideologically, exactly the same. The only thing they care about is power from themselves. So the average person, there's not like a free state and a slave state or, anything like that.
Does it say that, or is that just more propaganda?
So that part is in Emmanuel Goldstein's book.
Okay.
Now, the origins of Emmanuel Goldstein's book is, I think, iffy. In the movie, it makes it seem like Emmanuel Goldstein's book is simply just
Garbage.
is just made up by the Big Brother. I think I don't know, it's been a while since I read the book, but I didn't get that impression when I read the book in high school. But, maybe that's part of the point that, you had the Cold War, United States and Russia, and, were they ideologically that different in some ways? Well, I don't know. They both, I think there's definitely differences, of course, profound differences between the communists and Americans, but I think both wanted power in a certain way, so that might resolve some of the irony.
So 1984 is like Soviet Russia, and Eagle Eye is like 2000s America.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Nice.
Yep.
We should find some Cold War movies to watch.
Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
I think we watched that one before.
I thought that was an Aliens movie.
It is, but it's about communism.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Because you don't know who could be like an undercover communist spy or who's kind of McCarthyism type thing.
Yeah.
All right, that's 1984/Eagle Eye. Any final thoughts? I have a final thought.
Sure.
In the scene near the end of Eagle Eye, when Shia LaBeouf shoots the gun in the air to scare everybody, to stop the explosion from going off, and then he gets shot and he falls down on the floor. You know what that made me think of?
What's that?
The Shooting, aka Dear Sister.
Yeah.
Because Shia LaBeouf
is in Dear Sister,
and he gets shot and he falls on the floor.
I don't think I've ever seen an SNL skit that is so hit or miss as Dear Sister. I find it
for people you show it to.
Yeah, I find it hilarious, and a lot of my friends find it hilarious. But then we show it to other people, and they're like, "You guys watch weird stuff."
I think it's funny, but I couldn't say why.
I'm not sure why either. I'm really not. I think just because it's so counter to reality. It's not supposed to be realistic at all, but for some reason it kind of is.
If you haven't seen Dear Sister, look it up. It's good stuff, or not, depending on who you are. Apparently.
And tweet us and let you know what you think.
Yeah,
if it's funny or not.
Tweet your reactions.
Yes.
We're not to that part yet. We have another segment that comes before that.
That's true.
Which is
the joke of the week.
Okay, Daniel, you have the joke of the week.
Okay, here it is. This man walks into a cafe or a bar or some bar and grill restaurant, and he sits at the bar on a stool next to this cowboy, and he looks at the person working, and he says, "Hey, can I have some chili?" And the person working says, "Sorry, we're out of chili. That guy next to you took the last bowl." And he's like, "Okay, I'll take a burger instead." And so the person brings out a burger, and the guy decides, "I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can trade here." But the thing is that the cowboy is just staring at his chili. He hasn't touched it. He's just staring at it. And so he taps the cowboy on the shoulder, and he says, "Hey, you want to trade? I have this burger. Can I have your chili?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And so the guy starts eating the chili, and then he eats it down enough so that he sees there's a dead mouse in the bottom of the chili. And he's so revolted by it that he vomits everything he's just eaten back into the chili bowl. And the guy with the cowboy hat turns and looks to him and says, "That's how far I got to."
I remember telling that joke to some people in the cafeteria while there was chili, and they were eating chili.
I think I was there for that.
I think you were, and not only did they stop eating chili, but they didn't eat chili again for the entire year. It was like the next year they were like, this is the first bowl of chili I've been able to eat since you told me that joke, and it's a struggle.
Some people are just really disgusted by vomit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those people. I'm a sympathy puker.
Really?
If someone starts puking or gagging, it's game over. I'm going to join them.
You're kind of like, you need a friend.
Yeah.
So, here's a story.
Hold on. This has been the joke of the week.
All right,
okay,
so
now
here's my quick story. So, over Christmas break, my brother got sick.
Okay.
And so we were like, we're doing this like family video at home, and part of it's outside. And so we're like, all right, Joey, that's my brother. Shout out to Joey. And so we're like, all right, can you just do this part and then you can go back inside? And he's like, okay. And he held it together for a while, and then he like starts throwing up like on the ground.
Oh.
And we're just like, I'm like, awesome. And my mom's like, no. And later they were like, you had a camera, you should have filmed it. And I was like, well, I felt bad. And my brother's like, well, you should have filmed it. And I was like, okay, regrets.
Next time, we'll know for next time.
If you want to be a big time director, man, you just have to have your camera running 24/7.
You got to film
That's
the little
true.
things in life.
Same camera we used to shoot the dog in the woods, though. So
Oh. Did you also use it to shoot the Newman family Christmas special?
yeah,
Nice.
Have you put that on the internet at all?
like,
The one you just filmed?
oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's what we were shooting, and also no.
Ah.
But anyway, the battery would die. Is what I was saying.
That is true from personal experience.
Yeah, we've moved on to greater things. Fortunately,
Barely.
barely.
Yeah, wait until you see this new one.
With this new camera, we still have battery issues.
There was another battery. I just left the camera bag in my car,
Oh.
so would have been fine.
Yeah.
Also, I had like left it on all the time rather than turning it off. But you know, you learn.
Oh.
So that's today's episode. You can follow us on Twitter at just Dog in the Woods 15. I'm mixing up my media pages.
Did you use 15 because 2015 is when we made the movie?
When we came out in 2016. There.
Yeah.
When we thought of it.
Yes, The Dog in the Woods was born.
The Dog in the Woods was
2015.
Dog in the Woods 15. So now you can remember.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook and Instagram at The Dog in the Woods, and on the interwebs at thedoginthewoods.com, where you can find this podcast and our movies.
Think we'll ever do like blog stuff? What would we? Blog?
Hopefully so.
What would we blog about?
I don't know. Our opinions on The Last Jedi, maybe.
Our opinions on Trump, because that's what everyone's doing these days.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk any more about that than I have to.
So that means we're making you political commentator.
Yeah.
No.
We made this guy political commentary.
Why
'cause
can't we just agree on things?
That's why we made you the commentator, because you hate politics. So yeah, that's our stuff. Like us, follow us up. Send us your thoughts. Send us your memes.
Oh, they better be dank though.
If they're not dank, don't even.
Don't even start, man. Unless those memes are dank.
That's what I always say.
I'll take your undank memes. They're probably still pretty funny.
It's okay. He doesn't have very dank standards. So yeah, that's our stuff. Join us next time for All About Eve.
Yeah.
It'll be a time.
It will be.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Oh, see you later, there, bud.
Oh, see you, bud.
Okay, bye.
We'll just go out for a rip here.
Oh, yeah, out for a rip, bud. Okay. Bye.